When a community dares to stay faithful for 70 years through scarcity and loss, what if the real kingdom story God keeps writing in the Langley Christian School community is that He has worked through ordinary people and called the community into something much greater than they could ever see or realize within their own generation? This is a story about God's faithfulness across the Langley Christian School community's 70-year history, from 17 students to a school of over 1,400. It's a story about unlikely change due to the sacrificial generosity of families that have always been called to think about how their decisions would set up future generations to experience God's abundant faithfulness. It's about a community that has experienced loss during times of challenge, unmet expectations, and disappointments, but a story about God who has been faithful. And it's a story of hope and transformation as we continue to see the mission expand and God's faithfulness continue here in the LCS community. In this episode, you'll hear about the move from Shannon Heights to the 50th Avenue property with our elementary school, and how God continued to expand the mission and bring more families to Langley Christian. Between 1981 and 1999, the school grew from 200 students to 700 students. So, how do decisions made in faith become extraordinary legacy? In these two next episodes, listen as we trace the path through the 1980s into the turn of the 21st century with LCS's first grade 12 graduating class of 1999. In this episode, you'll hear about the move from Shannon Heights to the 50th Avenue property with our elementary school, and how God continued to expand the mission and bring more families to Langley Christian. Between 1981 and 1999, the school grew from 200 students to 700 students. So how do decisions made in faith become extraordinary legacy? And in these next two episodes, listen as we trace the path through the 1980s into the turn of the 21st century with LCS's first grade 12 graduating class of 1999. So just when the community seemed secure, a new challenge would test the community. So what happened next? In this last episode, you heard about the birth of a small Christian school that started with 17 students, and not all of them made it to the end of their first year. The beloved schoolhouse had outscaled its masonry. It purchased the property on Shannon Heights in 1969, but by 1981, Langley Christian School was looking to expand. In this episode, you'll hear stories about the school's rapid growth and some unlikely heroes. Now, one of the special parts of this series was sitting down with some legends in LCS's story. You'll first hear from kindergarten teacher Wilma van Brummelen about some of her experiences while working at LCS. I wonder if many of you had family or friends that were taught by her. In this second half of the episode, you'll hear from Principal and Superintendent Leo Smit. This episode will take our elementary school up to 1999. You'll hear in our next episode where the Plotlines splits and we trace the development of our middle and high school up to the first grade 12 grad class in 1999. So buckle up. We aren't riding horses and tractors anymore. Let's take one of the plot lines in our elementary school campus to Y2K. The move from Shannon Heights to the 21789 50th Avenue property was no small task. Let's go back to one of the founding families that you heard from in our first episode, who reminded us that impossible becomes possible with God. Here's Willie Vanderhook, Margaret Kunst, and Laura Folkerts, 3 generations of LCS families that you heard from in our first episode.
Grandpa had to fight the township for, you talk about wells, but there was no water on that side of Fraser Highway. And Grandpa had to go to the township and fight you guys.
I know.
to get water across Fraser Highway.
It was a sewer.
Sewer,
right.
Okay.
So then they just wouldn't, I think they wouldn't give us the permit for the sewer. And then there was a way that they thought they could bring it under the highway and hook up to the sewer on the other side.
Parents stepped in, grandparents stepped in, and they were with their own shovels and hands digging, maybe someone brought an old excavator, I don't know, but people put their blood, sweat, and tears into this place.
Tell that story about why the kids thought we didn't actually need the sewer.
Now, one of the kids said, well, I don't know why we need that. Nobody does number 2 at school. Yes.
We know for a fact that is not true.
In our first episode, we also heard from Sam Wind. He and his siblings attended Langley Christian in the original schoolhouse in the late 1950s. Sam reflects back on a photo with Willie's husband, Ted Vanderhook, and the work that the committee that Ted was a part of did to pave the way for the school on the 50th Avenue property.
I was looking at a picture from the Langley Advance where I see Ted Vanderhook putting the shovel in the ground. And I recall the meeting where we talked about moving to that location. And these folks who own this property insisted that it be used for a Christian school. It was, I think it was 9 acres, if I remember right, 9 or 10 acres. And it was zoned for that particular use. So there I seen God's hand at work already saying, you know what? This is where it's going to be. It was a big step for the school too. I mean, going from a 5-acre parcel on Shannon Heights and moving over to this area was it was a big commitment. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, it was probably had some anxiety there. But I just look back and I can just see God's faithfulness in providing not only the land, but then also the wherewithal and the people's commitment to go ahead and build it. So that really impacted me. And I see this picture, and you just see that all the people standing around saying, okay, let's go, let's move ahead.
The move to the 50th Avenue property set the stage for what came next. But the heart of this chapter isn't found only in land and timelines. It's found in the people who showed up every day and answered to God's faithfulness with tangible obedience. So we're going to step away from the property story for a moment and hear from one of those people. We'll come back to the land and the timeline, but the decisions that people in our community made reveal some of God's heart for this community and are critical to explore. So this episode features Wilma Van Brummelen, legendary kindergarten teacher. Wilma served at LCS for 22 years between the years of 1988 and 2010. We connected as some of Wilma's grandchildren are some of my closest friends and helped facilitate the connection. Please pardon any background noises. We actually met Wilma for lunch and couldn't miss any moments of the conversation. Wilma ordered a peppermint tea, and Adam Wolders, our head of school, and I had a chance to visit her. She insisted on treating us to a meal, and you'll hear me share some of our excitement for connecting with Wilma while we were sharing lunch together.
I'm Wilma Van Brummelen, and I used to teach in Langley Christian School, and from 1988 to 2010, loved every bit of it. Ever since I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, but God didn't quite work that out with everything else that was going on. So I thought after being in the hospital and being an operating room technician, maybe this is the time for me to go ahead and try some of that.
It's 1958, and Wilma's family has immigrated to Canada from Holland. Her parents are carrying their faith and their hope as they settle in Ontario. And Wilma's father serves as a pastor while her mother anchors the home. And Wilma, half jokingly, half serious, would later say that she prayed so persistently for a sister that God had answered her prayer, and family came quickly, along with responsibilities. And so for 2 years, Wilma stayed at home, helping her mother raise her siblings, learning patience before she had words for it, and learning care long before it became a calling. Those instincts followed her into the hospital, where she trained as an operating room technician and learned her bedside manner. At the bedside there, in quiet urgency and careful presence, something formative started to take root. She learned how to attend to people when it mattered most. Years later, that same attentiveness drew her back into the classroom. And in 1988, having completed her degree through Trinity Western University, she soon stepped into a kindergarten classroom at Langley Christian School.
I'll show you the little Bible, the children's Bible that I always used in kindergarten, and how sometimes there'd be new curriculum and I wasn't supposed to do that, but I was very naughty. And I actually read the whole story that I read to my children when they were little. It's really, really old. Yeah, it's got tape that's coming off.
But what began as a job slowly became a vision, one that God had been shaping in her family across generations. And looking back, Wilma would say in those early moments of home, hospital, and classroom that they were never separate chapters, that they were preparation. And through them, God placed something larger on her family's heart, a deep and enduring conviction about the power and the purpose of Christian education here in British Columbia. Wilma was also married to Dr. Harrow Van Brummelen, who passed away in 2012. Harrow served as a founding member of the Society of Christian Schools and as curriculum coordinator. He wrote several books on Christian education that are still widely used around the world to train Christian teachers. Harrow wrote a reflection piece in 1995 for Christian schools in BC, and he shared the following. Among the leadership that founded these schools, there are dreamers. They were motivated by faith who plod on from day to day under difficult circumstances to make Christian schools possible. Harrow went on to call Christian schools to be distinctly Christian. His note ended by saying, Christian schooling is alive and well in BC. And going on further, he said, the schools continue to grow both in quantity and quality. Schools want to serve their Lord in all aspects of their program and structures, and that provides a wonderful basis on which to plan for the future, and of course, also gives us great responsibility to carry out our mandate in obedience to God's will. Here's Wilma talking about Harrow's legacy and one of his books, Walking with God in the Classroom.
I married him, of course, many, many years ago. We didn't even make our 49th wedding anniversary, the 50th. He died of lung cancer. He was also quite involved, of course, did a lot of writing of books. I always proofread his books, and I said, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work in a kindergarten or a grade 1 or a grade 2. It doesn't work. So change it. So he went back and changed it.
Wilma opened up her life to us with the same spirit of generosity that we felt was passed on through the school's DNA from the founders. It was a joy to hear about Wilma's experiences. There were so many people that she was a kindergarten teacher to, and Wilma's faith and practice has been inspiring to this community for decades. There's a legacy of faith that was planted and has grown generation after generation at LCS. Wilma and her family have been some of those abiding branches within the story, reminding us of other branches grafted into God's vine of faithfulness.
One of the things that is happening now that is just an evidence, I think, of how the Holy Spirit is moving in Langley is we have so many families now who used to go to public schools but now want Christian school for their kids, but they don't know the story of Christian schools.
Exactly.
And
they get plunked into it.
Yeah, and they don't know how it's supposed to be different other than the teacher shares my values and I go to church with the teacher.
Oh yeah, no, there's lots more.
Yeah. My daughter's in grade 5 and my middle son is graduating this year. My older son graduated in 2022, but I said, hey, these buildings that are here, this school that is here, this was the vision of people in 1955. They did it, and in the 60s they bought a piece of property, and then in the 90s they built another piece of property. In 2000s they bought another piece of property, and it's always God has always expanded things. Yeah. And these people built this, and so we are drinking from wells that we didn't dig, and we're reaping from fields that we didn't sow. Yeah. And now it's our turn to do that for the next generation.
We have to turn it around. Yeah. And you can't just die and say I never did that. This is the time to do it.
Wilma's story underscores what it means for this community to continually adapt faithfully. Now let's jump back to the Shannon Heights storyline. It's 1981, and the school returned to its original name, Langley Christian School, when it moved to the elementary property on 50th Avenue.
At that time, it was Shannon Heights, and then during the partway through the year, they went to Southern Langley Mennonite, Southern Langley, I believe.
To help take us from 1986 on the elementary school campus to 1995, here's Sam Wind introducing us to Principal and Superintendent Leo Smit.
And even there, I saw God's faithfulness. The campus was being built. And, the field was still no grass on it. And I remember the new principal, Mr. Leo Smit, came, and he called me up and he said, "We have a big problem." And I said, "What would that be?" And he said, "We have no grass. The kids are going to be in the mud. It's going to be terrible." And I said to him, "It's ready to go. We're going to seed it." And he goes, "Yeah, but it's almost August." I said, "Not to worry. This is British Columbia." And we seeded the grass, and September going along, we had cut the grass 3 times already by the time school started, right? And he just says, "Well, I'm used to Ontario. It doesn't grow."
My name is Leo Smit, and when I accepted the call to Langley, I was excited about a new opportunity. I was excited about developing programs that were creative and risk-taking. I wanted gifted people to take risks and to take chances in developing not traditional trends, but cast new visions. So we introduced student learning conferences. We expanded programs. I developed an administrative team at the elementary campus of curriculum coordinators and a VP rather than just one principal and one vice principal, a key librarian position. And then we moved into recruiting foreign students as well, and moved into a development director for Korean students, because that was a market that was thrown in our direction. We needed money. We needed development, and we started a Langley Christian School housing project. We lined up a number of different businessmen and tradespeople, and Sam was one of them. His company covered the insurance coverage for the construction, and we bought properties and we developed them, and things were done at cost or below cost, and then we sold houses for a number of years. Real estate, of course, was difficult to get after a number of years, so that was only lasted a number of years. But groundbreaking. I think the most exciting story was when you see God's hand in action, where we had the phenomenal growth up to 400 plus. And then we began to move into a middle school direction, and then follow that with a high school.
I asked Leo what the community felt like when he started at the school.
Change after change after change. I came in 86. I came for the interview. Grace Muller picked me up from Seattle Airport, and I had my interview.
You'll remember Grace Muller, who we spoke with in our first episode. Leo's referring to when she became a board member in the 1980s and was a part of the team that hired him.
And I thought, this school is just too remote, too isolated. And we came back and banners galore saying, "Please don't go, please don't go." And we basically said, "No, we're going to stay." But Langley said, "Can you take another 72 hours? I thought, why do I need another 72 hours? Anyways, to make a long story short, 72 hours later, my wife and I woke up from a Wednesday morning for breakfast, and I said to her, something's come up. She says, "I need to say something. We need to take the job." And that's how it went. We announced that we were going to come, and we did the big move. I moved myself with a U-Haul truck, and we pulled into Langley, and the board chair that had hired me was not the board chair that started that September. It was the traditional, long-standing founding father, and he was as hard as nails. He didn't want to commit to my contract. He said, "I don't need a wise man from the East." And I thought, oh boy. And I had board members. Their intent was to keep the school small, maybe 200, and status quo. No vision. And I said, "Lord, what am I doing here? What have I given up?" Anyways, was a board election after my first year, partway through the year, for new board members. and they had more originally fixed in their ways board members. But a couple of pastors had gotten together and nominated two people off the floor that were not on the nomination list. And one of them was Harold Van Brummelen, who was a visionary at Trinity Western, head of the Society of Christian Schools, and that turned my life around. We were able to cast a vision and dream and grow, and things just took off. 86, 87 were struggling years, but all of a sudden we got the growth. And in 8 years' time, we grew from 180 to almost 400.
Amazing.
It was building additions, portables, excitement. My adrenaline was just going. And unbelievable, because that property has suited us so well. It's an answer to prayer. To have a location that was well suited and easy access, and to allow us a number of years later to purchase an elementary campus just down the road. Divine intervention.
Let's paint a picture of the elementary school campus on the 50th Avenue property. In 1986, there were 8 classrooms and 233 students. The gym had change rooms and a new sound system. The computer lab was equipped with 12 Philips computers. According to Eric Bilinga, alumni and now LCS IT manager, students were working with 5.25-inch floppy disks. By 1991, the new primary wing housed 3 kindergarten classes. The library space was doubled, and the band program started in grade 7. By 1994, 6 portables were added to keep up with the growth, along with the addition of a grade 8 class.
Well, the additional classrooms and then Portable City, we had portables galore. We actually started our middle school in the portables. But the excitement of the elementary campus, I think some of my best favorite teachers were primary teachers. They were the hardest working people. And I had some of the most energetic primary teachers, and they were a joy to work with. And that's why I felt that having a curriculum coordinator to focus on primary teachers was essential. And we had gifted people that stepped into those roles. And that made my role a lot easier because I was dealing with growth, building, expansion, promotion, fundraising, and losing contact with the day-to-day stuff of students. So having primary and an intermediate coordinator for curriculum was a blessing.
This was a turbulent time politically for independent schools. The Independent School Act was being revised. On July 7, 1989, the Independent School Act was passed by the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. And on September 1, 1989, the Act came into effect. This replaced the older Independent School Support Act and created a comprehensive framework for all independent schools. It didn't just say, we'll fund some schools. It gave the government authority to regulate independent schools, classify them, set certification standards, and establish funding eligibility. One of the hallmarks was recognizing parental choice in education and combining educational standards with the legal structure. Victoria Cunningham, in her book, Justice Achieved, describing the political struggle of independent schools in BC, stated that the milestone reached, and I quote, was a reflection of a distinct change in the public's attitude towards independent schools. Now, like never before, independent schools were widely accepted as an integral part of the educational system. They were treated accordingly. Now, Cunningham went on to describe that independent schools now have the best of both worlds: greater financial security and freedom to pursue their distinctive educational philosophies. The government has given independent schools substantial latitude within the conditions imposed on funding and allowed independent schools to maintain control over the essential aspects of their operations. This was good news. Harold Van Brummelen, in his 1993 study on the impact of funding, went on to share that some schools clarify their vision and plan Christian learning approaches more zealously than before funding, while others accept government directives with little consideration of their implications. The landscape was changing, and Langley Christian School was adapting faithfully for a changing world. Here's Leo Smit talking about the shift towards schools receiving up to 50% funding per pupil for tuition costs.
We never realized that point because the radio talk show hosts and the public came to our defense. They said independent schools have proven themselves, and independent schools are providing an alternative that is keeping the public school up on their toes. And a few years later, funding increased to 50%. Another exhale moment to be just, wow, unbelievable.
I asked Leo what God's faithfulness across generations means to him now.
It's grace. It's God's grace that allows generation to generation to carry on. To see a vision cast and see people to buy into it. I remember Grace Muller, one of the original members of the board, and Ted Vanderhoek basically saying, we want this school to become a school of 200 and be fully debt-free. And I remember saying, we got to dream bigger. We got to dream bigger. And the dreams came, and the growth came. And I remember Ted Vanderhoek coming back to me one time at the 60th anniversary. He got up in the audience and he said, there was this wise man from the East. He said, I gave him a hard time. He said, but that wise man of the East proved me wrong. And he says, I take my hat, and he came off the stage and he gave me this big hug, and he was not a huggable guy. And I just thought, wow. And our debt was big. And the challenge was how to pay off that debt, right? And now you got another multi-million-dollar expansion. But the vision has to stay alive. And you need the right people to share the excitement and to smile about it and to say, this is great, and to punch the energy and to share it, to tell the story. And I'm so glad you're doing this because it's important for the next generation to see that vision.
Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2. Write the vision, make it plain. To close, I asked Leo about how to keep the vision and the story of the school alive. Here's what he told me.
It's a phenomenal growth. How do you keep the vision and the history of the school alive? And I did this Wednesday morning or Wednesday evening coffee sessions where I invited parents to the school. I did a PowerPoint presentation to remind them the story and the journey of our school. I wanted to keep that alive because we were growing so fast, people were not knowing the story. And I think it's very important to keep the history. So I'm glad you're doing this because people need to know the sacrifice, the foundations, the sweat and toil that went into the development and the growth. And you can't lose sight of that because there was a vision that was cast. And that vision has to be taken hold of by others again. And I stand amazed that the school is, 1,400 kids now? That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. My biggest celebration was we were the first middle school program in BC. And I get emotional about the fact that they caught onto that vision. I wanted it, I pushed it, people bought into it, and it has grown to what it is today.
You'll hear more about that middle school story in the next episode.
Be thankful for the blessings of LCS. And be thankful for God's grace and guidance from generation to generation. It's phenomenal. And we can't take it for granted. We may never take it for granted. But it always requires humbleness, joy, and prayer. And you can't go wrong when you keep God front and center. I always said, The joy of Langley Christian School is that Jesus Christ is front and center in every classroom. He's the most welcome guest. He's the honored guest, and we bow before him. God's blessings to you, the staff. I looked at your directory and I thought, I recognize maybe 6 or 7 names.
So there you have it, episode 2. 2 amazing humans in the story of Langley Christian School. We have more stories to tell. Let's set up our next episode. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Langley Christian's elementary was no longer a fragile experiment. It was a community learning slowly and imperfectly what it meant to trust God with growth it did not fully control. The move to the 50th Avenue property did more than provide space. It forced the school to ask harder questions about identity, sustainability, and purpose. Families continued to give sacrificially, not because these outcomes were guaranteed, but because faithfulness had become part of the school's shared imagination. Parents returned as volunteers. They hosted large community events like the Spring Festival. Some returned with their own children, and what began with a handful of families became a multi-generational story, shaped as much by ordinary obedience as bold decisions. There were tensions, growth-strained facilities. Expectations for providing quality academics rose still with the desire to support students' faith formation. Financial pressures never left and fully disappeared. And yet, again and again, the community chose faith over fear with God's help, stewardship over control, and long-term vision over short-term certainty. Teachers stayed when they could have left. Leaders made decisions without knowing how the next chapter would be funded. Families committed to a mission that increasingly asked more of them. And by the time Langley Christian prepared to graduate its first grade 12 class in 1999, the question was no longer whether the school would survive. The question had become something far more demanding. What kind of community was God forming here? And what would faithfulness require next? This episode closes with a school on the edge of transformation. Enrollment has grown, the mission has expanded, and the need is clear. And the next decision will change everything. Because when faithfulness spans generations, the cost does not disappear. The demand for greater attention to God's abiding presence is needing leadership. In the next episode, we follow the risky decisions that led to the first grade 12 class of 1999 and ask what the community did when faithfulness alone was no longer enough and the expansion became unavoidable. We'll explore how the middle school and high school was built. We'll hear from key leaders in the school such as Peter Van Heusen and Peter Raukema, who served during critical transitions in LCS's history. We'll ask what brought Peter Van Heusen over from Ontario and how God called him and his family. We'll also hear from former students, first grad class alumni in 1999, and now principals of our middle school, Danny Nagtical and Brenda Wind. They'll have some great stories to share with you that you'll want to hear about. That will take us into the second plot line, into the turn of the 21st century, as we continue to catch a vision of what God has been doing here at Langley Christian across generations. This episode was written by Kevin Merchandani and produced by Ralph Alvaro.